Did you know that one of the Church's most beloved sacramentals, the Brown Scapular, began with a vision granted to a silent friar in 13th century England? That this man once lived inside a hollow tree, seeking only God in solitude? That his quiet faith would shape the destiny of an entire religious order? He never sought fame or recognition, only fidelity to God and trust in the Blessed Virgin Mary. In silence and perseverance, he remained faithful to his calling. This is the story of Saint Simon Stock. Chapter 1. The Child in the Oak Tree. In the quiet countryside of 13th century Kent, England, a child named Simon was born into a devout Christian family. From an early age, he showed a deep sensitivity to the things of God. While other children were drawn to games and noise, Simon was drawn to silence. He would often wander away from the crowd to pray alone, his heart fixed on something beyond the world around him. Simon had a special love for the Blessed Virgin Mary. His family kept a simple image of her in their home, and it became his favorite place of prayer. He would kneel before it for long moments, whispering words that came not from memorization, but from affection. Even as a boy, he seemed to understand that Mary was more than a distant figure. She was a mother, a guide, and a quiet presence in the life of a soul seeking God. At that time, Europe was deeply marked by the Crusades. Tales of knights fighting in the Holy Land filled the air, stirring the imagination of many. But Simon felt called to a different kind of mission, not to travel east with sword in hand, but to journey inward. For him, the real battle was not on distant fields, but in the heart. His was a call to solitude, penance, and contemplation. At the age of 12, Simon made a radical choice. With the reluctant blessing of his parents, he left his home and walked into the forest, seeking a place to live alone with God. There, he found the hollow trunk of a large oak tree, its center empty, but its shelter strong. It was in this natural hermitage that Simon began a new way of life, hidden from the world, but fully open to grace. Inside that oak, he embraced simplicity with joy. He ate only what the forest provided. He prayed constantly, rising before dawn and spending his days in silence and scripture. The comforts of the world were absent, but Simon lacked nothing. In solitude, he discovered the richness of communion with God, something that neither wealth nor applause could offer. For nearly 20 years, Simon remained in the woods, largely unknown. But this hidden life was not wasted time. It was formation. His heart was being shaped in the fire of silence, disciplined in trust, and rooted in the love of Mary. Every hardship became a prayer, every season a new lesson. The boy who entered the forest grew into a man of God. And so, while kings battled for power and crusaders marched to distant lands, deep within the stillness of the English woods, Simon Stock embraced a calling the world could not see. In the hollow of an old oak tree, God was preparing not a warrior of conquest, but a soul of contemplation. He was not yet known, not yet revered, but already he was learning the sacred art of surrendering everything to the will of God. Chapter 2. Joining the Carmelites. After nearly 20 years of solitude, Simon Stock's life took an unexpected turn. News reached him that a group of monks had arrived in England from the Holy Land. They were called Carmelites, men of prayer and penance, rooted in the tradition of the prophet Elijah and devoted entirely to the Blessed Virgin Mary. Drawn by curiosity and a deep stirring within, Simon left his forest refuge and went to meet them. What he encountered moved him deeply. The Carmelites carried the spirit of the desert silence, simplicity, and a burning love for God. Yet they lived together in fraternity, combining solitude with community life. Their way of living echoed everything Simon had practiced in private, but now it had structure, rhythm, and brotherhood. Their devotion to Mary was not just personal, it was the very heart of their identity. Simon felt at home. After prayer and discernment, he asked to be received into the order. The brothers, sensing the depth of his soul, welcomed him with reverence. When he put on the brown habit of Carmel, it was not a beginning, but a fulfillment. He did not need to adjust his heart, he only needed to step into a life that already matched his own. The fire that had burned quietly in the oak tree now found a place to shine within the church. Though he had lived alone for years, Simon adapted quickly to communal life. His humility allowed him to submit joyfully to the rule. He followed the daily rhythm of prayer, work, and silence with the same intensity he had known in the forest. He asked for no position, sought no praise, but his example spoke more powerfully than any sermon. His peace was contagious, his prayer was steady, his presence was felt. Brothers began to seek him out, not because he was eloquent, but because he was grounded. When he spoke, it was with clarity, gentleness, and conviction. He guided others not by theory, but by lived experience. For many young friars, he became a spiritual father, teaching not only how to pray, but how to live in total surrender to God. At this time, the Carmelite Order in Europe was still fragile. They were newcomers, facing misunderstanding and uncertainty. Some questioned their identity, others doubted their future. In the midst of this, Simon became a steady flame burning quietly, giving warmth, never wavering. He did not fight with arguments, but with fidelity. He reminded the community who they were, men set apart for God, called to walk with Elijah's spirit and Mary's heart. Simon's stock had gone from the stillness of the woods to the heart of a community in need. And though he never sought leadership, he had become something more important, a living example. In a time of trial, the Carmelite brothers looked to him not for authority, but for light, and in his silent fidelity, they found both. Chapter 3. Carmel in the Storm. As the Carmelite Order took root in Europe, it faced both curiosity and skepticism. Born from a hermit tradition on Mount Carmel, its focus on silence and contemplation seemed out of place in 13th century cities. Church leaders, influenced by active orders like the Franciscans and Dominicans, questioned the relevance of such a secluded way of life. Could hermits truly serve the church in a world now turning toward preaching, public ministry, and visible action? In England and beyond, the Carmelites found themselves under pressure. Some questioned their legitimacy. Others accused them of clinging to outdated ideals. The call to adapt grew louder. Should they become more active, more visible, more like the other mendicant orders? Or should they hold fast to their eremitical roots? The tensions spread through the communities. Brothers debated. Chapters grew tense. The identity of the order itself seemed at risk. This was the storm into which Simon Stock stepped, not with anger, but with conviction. He had lived both lives, the hermit hidden in the woods and the friar walking with his brothers. He understood the need for reform, but feared the loss of soul. To him, the essence of Carmel was not external form, but inner fire. The order did not need to abandon its roots to be fruitful. It needed to let its roots nourish whatever new form God was asking it to take. Simon became a voice of clarity in the midst of confusion. He reminded the brothers that their strength did not lie in popularity or approval, but in their fidelity to prayer, to silence, and above all, to Mary. Carmel, he insisted, was not a relic of the past, it was a prophetic witness for the present. A life centered on God was never outdated. In fact, it was more necessary than ever in a world drifting into noise and distraction. He urged the community to adapt wisely, but not to compromise its core. They could enter towns, build priories, and serve the church, but always as contemplatives. Their action must be born from prayer. Their preaching must flow from silence. To be Carmelite, Simon said, was not to withdraw in fear, but to step out in spiritual strength. Under his influence, the order began to find its footing. It embraced certain practical changes without losing its soul. Simon's leadership helped bridge the gap between the original vision of Carmel and the pastoral needs of Europe. He showed that reform was possible without rupture, and that faithfulness could walk hand in hand with flexibility. In a time of crisis, Simon Stock offered more than opinions, he offered witness. His calm presence, grounded in years of interior formation, became a compass for the whole order. The storm did not pass quickly, but through Simon, Carmel remembered who it was and began to walk forward with renewed confidence, not away from its identity, but deeper into it. Chapter 4. Elected Prior General. In the year 1245, the Carmelite Order turned to a man who had never sought leadership, but who had already proven himself through years of silent fidelity, Simon Stock. He was elected Prior General not because of ambition, but because the brothers recognized in him a rare depth of prayer, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to the heart of Carmel. His election marked the beginning of a new chapter, one not of power, but of purification. Simon understood that the order did not need revolution, it needed restoration. From the outset, he called his brothers to return to their origins, to the desert spirituality of Mount Carmel, to the fire of Elijah, to the quiet strength of Mary. He urged a renewal not based on popularity or visibility, but on deeper prayer, fasting, and fidelity to their contemplative identity. The first reform, he said, must take place in the soul. He encouraged every community to embrace a renewed rhythm of penance and silence. He called the friars to fast not only from food, but from comfort and compromise. He re-emphasized the daily chanting of the divine office, Lectio Divina, and personal prayer. True reform, Simon taught, would come not through grand declarations, but through small acts of daily faithfulness. Holiness, he reminded them, begins in hidden places. Simon did not lead from a distance. Despite his age, he undertook long journeys to visit Carmelite houses across Europe. He traveled not with pomp, but with humility, walking when he could, staying in modest quarters, and joining the friars in their daily routines. He prayed with them, listened to them, encouraged them. His presence brought calm. His example brought hope. Wherever he went, the brothers felt less alone. In community after community, Simon quietly rekindled what had dimmed. He reminded his brothers that their call was not to imitate other orders, but to be who they were meant to be, contemplatives rooted in silence, servants guided by Mary, prophets in a noisy world. He corrected with compassion and led with gentleness. Many friars, especially the younger ones, looked to him not only as a leader, but as a spiritual father. Simon never promised the order would flourish in worldly terms. He offered something better, a reminder that faithfulness was enough. He taught that survival did not depend on approval, but on trust. Trust in God's providence, trust in Mary's care, trust that the narrow, hidden road of Carmel still led to holiness and that holiness was always enough. He governed not by decree, but by example. His strength was quiet, but firm. His leadership was not institutional, it was personal. And in a time of trial, it was precisely that witness of lived fidelity that helped the order remember who it was. Simon Stock became not just a general, he became the elder brother who walked with them and the anchor that helped them hold fast. Chapter 5. Bridge between East and West. As Prior General, Simon Stock found himself at a crossroads between two worlds. The Carmelite Order, born in the deserts of Mount Carmel and shaped by Elijah's spirit, now faced life in medieval Europe, crowded cities, active ministry, and shifting ecclesial expectations. The question was urgent. Could the order remain faithful to its contemplative roots while adapting to a Western church that no longer resembled the solitude of the East? Simon believed it could, but only with wisdom, prayer, and deep fidelity. Simon recognized the tension, but he did not fear it. Instead, he engaged it with discernment and humility. He knew the original rule of St. Albert, written for hermits living in the Holy Land, was difficult to apply in the new context of Europe, where public ministry and communal structures were growing. Yet he also knew that changing external circumstances should never erase interior commitments. Carmel could evolve, but it could not forget who it was. With prayerful determination, Simon petitioned the Holy See for a mitigation of the rule, not to weaken it, but to allow the friars to live it more fruitfully in their new environment. The request was granted in 1247 by Pope Innocent IV, who approved revisions that maintained the spirit of the rule while adapting certain practices, allowing the friars to live in cities, engage in limited public ministry, and structure their communities with greater flexibility. But Simon was careful. Adaptation must never become dilution. He insisted that contemplation remain at the heart of Carmelite life. Silence, prayer, and interior union with God were non-negotiable. The friars might now preach, study, or serve the needs of the church more publicly, but only if their action flowed from deep intimacy with Christ. The Carmelite was still, first and always, a contemplative. At the center of this identity, Simon placed the Virgin Mary. He didn't simply encourage Marian devotion, he defined it as essential. Mary was not just the patroness of Carmel, she was its soul. Her example of listening, obedience, and interior strength became the model for every friar. Simon constantly reminded his brothers, to be Carmelite is to live with Mary, to think with Mary, to serve Christ with the heart of Mary. This Marian vision shaped the way the order understood itself in the West. It was not an abandonment of the desert, it was the flowering of the desert in a new climate. Simon's leadership created the foundation for a Carmelite spirituality that was both ancient and alive, hidden yet missionary, deeply rooted yet open to new soil. Through his wisdom, Simon's stock became a bridge between East and West, past and future, silence and service. He preserved the flame of Carmel not by locking it away, but by allowing it to breathe in new air without losing its light. And in doing so, he ensured that the contemplative spirit of Elijah would continue to burn not only on Mount Carmel, but across the world. Chapter 6. A Song in the Dark. Simon Stock had always carried within him a deep devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. From his earliest days as a boy praying before her image, to his long years of silence in the forest, Mary had been more than a symbol. She had been his guide, his comfort, his mother. As his journey in Carmel deepened, that devotion matured into something even more profound, a personal relationship shaped by trust, reverence, and total surrender. It was from this place of spiritual intimacy that Simon felt called to give voice to what words could hardly contain. His heart, formed in solitude and shaped by prayer, longed to express the mystery and majesty of Mary, not only as the Queen of Heaven, but as the living heart of Carmel. He did not seek to write a hymn. He sought to offer a prayer, a gift to the one who had led him all his life. The words came quietly like a whisper from within. Flos Carmeli, vitis florigera, splendor caeli, virgo puerpera, flower of Carmel, blossoming vine, splendor of heaven, virgin-bearing child. Each line unfolded like petals, delicate yet strong, simple yet rich in meaning. Simon's prayer was not poetic for its own sake, it was contemplative. Every word revealed who Mary was to him. A flower blooming in the wilderness, a light that radiated in silence, a mother whose strength was hidden in gentleness. The Latin phrases carried centuries of tradition and layers of theological beauty, yet remained deeply personal. Mother mild, yet ever undefiled. Simon saw in Mary a paradox both tender and powerful, the Virgin who bore Christ, the silent one who crushed the serpent, the humble one exalted above angels. Through her, he had learned to listen. Through her, he had learned to obey. In her, he found the perfect image of contemplative life, rooted, radiant, hidden, and fruitful. When he shared the prayer with his Carmelite brothers, it resonated immediately, not because it was dramatic or revolutionary, but because it felt like home. In Flos Carmeli, they recognized the soul of their vocation. It became a prayer that gathered their identity into one voice, a voice not of argument or defense, but of love. It began to be recited in liturgies, whispered in private devotions, and cherished as a spiritual treasure. More than a hymn, Flos Carmeli became a mirror. In it, the friars saw what they were called to be, flowering vines clinging to Christ, rooted in Mary, quietly bearing fruit in hidden places. The prayer reminded them that their path was not defined by success, but by surrender, not by recognition, but by fidelity. Simon Stock would never write a book, lead armies, or sit on a throne, but in Flos Carmeli, he offered the church something lasting, a song not born from ambition, but from adoration, a prayer not shouted in triumph, but whispered in awe. And in that whisper, the heart of Carmel continues to bloom. Chapter 7. The Encounter with the Virgin. On the 16th of July, 1251, Simon Stock rose early to pray, as he had always done. Though, now elderly and worn by years of responsibility, his soul remained youthful in its longing for God. The order was still finding its place in Europe, fragile, often misunderstood, and carrying burdens too heavy for words. In silence, Simon placed them all before the one he trusted most, the Blessed Virgin Mary. Mary had been the heart of his devotion since childhood. She had accompanied him into solitude, guided him through leadership, and anchored the identity of Carmel in her quiet strength. That morning, as he knelt in his small cell in Cambridge, his prayer was simple but urgent. He asked for help, not for himself, but for the order he loved. He begged Mary to show her children that she had not forgotten them. In the stillness of that moment, a light unlike any other filled the room. Before Simon appeared, the Virgin Mary, radiant and serene, clothed in the Carmelite habit. In her hands, she held a small brown scapular, two simple pieces of cloth joined by thin cords. Her eyes, full of maternal love, met his. Then she spoke words that would remain engraved in the memory of Carmel forever. "Receive, my beloved son, this scapular of your order. It is a sign of my protection, a privilege for you and for all Carmelites. Whoever dies clothed in it shall not suffer eternal fire." With that, she placed the scapular in his hands. It was not just a piece of cloth. It was a sign of covenant, a gift of hope, a pledge of mercy. The vision passed as quietly as it had come, but Simon remained kneeling, his hands trembling around the scapular. His heart understood what had been given. It was not a public miracle. It was a deeply personal encounter, a confirmation from heaven that Mary's gaze still rested upon her sons. The scapular was a sign that she would walk with them, clothe them, and intercede for them until the end. Simon shared the vision first with his brothers, not as a proclamation, but as a testimony. They received it with joy, not as a promise of ease, but as a call to deeper trust. The scapular reminded them that to belong to Mary was not to escape hardship, but to be accompanied through it. Her protection was not always visible, but it was always present. The scapular was never meant to dazzle the world, it was meant to strengthen hearts. For Simon and his brothers, it became a quiet sign of Mary's promise, wrapped in humility. In this simple garment, they saw not magic, but mercy, not protection from suffering, but assurance of her presence in it. And though the world had yet to understand its meaning, the Carmelites now knew they were not alone. The Mother of God had claimed them as her own. Chapter 8. The Scapular, a small garment, a great mission. The scapular that Simon Stock received was simple in appearance. two squares of brown cloth joined by cords resting over the shoulders. But within this humble sign was contained a spiritual depth far greater than its form. For the Carmelites, it became not only a symbol of Mary's protection, but a daily reminder of who they were called to be: contemplatives, servants, and children of the Mother of God. Simon never promoted the scapular as a talisman, nor did he portray it as a magical guarantee. Rather, he saw it as a sign of relationship, of consecration. To wear the scapular was to make a silent profession that one's life belonged to Mary, that one walked under her mantle, and that one desired to live as she lived in humility, prayer, and obedience to the will of God. Among the friars, the scapular began to shape interior life in visible ways. It called them to renewed fidelity. As they put it on each morning, they were reminded to clothe themselves spiritually with purity, trust, and a Marian heart. It was not just about dying with the scapular, it was about living with it, letting it speak to every choice, every gesture, every hidden sacrifice. Simon taught that the scapular, though given through him, was meant for all Carmelites, and by extension for all who shared in the Carmelite spirit. In time, lay people who felt drawn to Mary's path of contemplation and service were also invited to wear the scapular, not as members of the order, but as spiritual companions. The garment, so small and quiet, began to carry a mission that far exceeded its size. What made the scapular so powerful was not the cloth itself, but the life it represented, a life entrusted to Mary's care and shaped by her example. It was an invitation to holiness in ordinary life, to seek God in the silence of one's heart, to serve others in hiddenness, to endure trials with serenity, and to say yes each day with quiet courage. It was a sign that heaven draws near not through spectacle, but through surrender. As the devotion spread, it did so not by force or promotion, but by witness. People who wore the scapular often spoke of a deepened peace, a growing closeness to Mary, and an increased desire to live in grace. Though it began in the Carmelite cloisters, it would soon reach families, parishes, and pilgrims, touching generations with a promise not of ease, but of presence. Simon Stock had received a gift for his order, but in time, it became a gift for the whole church. The scapular was not a reward for the holy. It was a path for the willing, and in its quiet simplicity, it continues to call hearts to something eternal, to walk with Mary, to live with trust, and to let even the smallest sign become the beginning of a greater surrender. Chapter 9. Grace in Hidden Places. The brown scapular, though small and plain, began to leave behind a trail of quiet stories, unassuming, almost hidden, yet deeply real. There were no grand announcements, no processions of miracles, but in villages, cities, and monasteries, people whispered of something stirring. Grace had begun to move slowly, humbly touching hearts through the silent presence of Mary's promise. One story came from a once hostile young man in a coastal village. Known for his anger and mockery of the church, he wore the scapular only to appease his aging mother. He laughed at it, ridiculed it until one evening, without planning to, he found himself praying, not with perfect words, but with longing. Days later, he returned to the chapel he hadn't entered since childhood. The scapular hadn't changed him instantly, but it had opened a crack in the wall he'd built around his soul. In another town, a merchant who had built his life on greed and dishonesty wore the scapular after a Carmelite friar gave it to him during a grave illness. Expecting nothing, he wore it out of fear more than faith. But after recovering, he began returning coins he had stolen, reconciling with estranged relatives, and quietly serving the poor. He told no one why, but those who knew him spoke of a man softened by something invisible. Simon Stock often heard stories like these, though he never sought to collect them. He cautioned against seeking signs. To him, the scapular was not about miracles, but about mercy. "The Mother of God works quietly," he would say. "She does not dazzle, she draws." He believed that Mary's work through the scapula was not to rescue souls in crisis, but to reshape them over time through fidelity, trust, and grace. Within Carmelite communities, the scapula renewed many who had grown weary. Brothers rekindled their devotion, confessed their hidden struggles, and deepened their prayer lives, not because they feared judgment, but because they remembered they were loved. The scapula on their shoulders reminded them daily they belonged to Mary, and she had not given up on them. Outside the cloister, lay people spoke of subtle shifts: a widow who found courage to forgive, a teenager who resisted pressure to abandon her faith, a businessman who began praying the rosary during lunch breaks. These were not stories for history books, but they were sacred nonetheless. Each one was a quiet return to the heart of God. Simon never presented the scapula as a shortcut to holiness. Rather, he offered it as a companion on the journey, a cloth that reminded, invited, and accompanied. In his view, the true miracle was not found in one moment of change, but in the persistence of grace over a lifetime. And so, through countless small yeses, through slow awakenings and whispered prayers, the scapula became what it was always meant to be, not just a sign of protection, but a gentle call home. Chapter 10. The Sabatine Privilege. For the faithful who lived under Mary's guidance, hope did not end at the grave. It reached beyond it. This trust gave rise to a cherished belief within the Carmelite tradition that the spiritual relationship formed with Mary in life did not dissolve with death, but grew even stronger. Those who belonged to her in this world could count on her presence in the next. In that spirit of hope, the tradition known as the Sabatine privilege took form. According to long-standing devotion, the Blessed Virgin promised to assist her faithful children, especially those who wore the scapula with devotion and lived a life of prayer and purity, by delivering them from purgatory on the first Saturday after their death. Though the Church has never defined this as a formal dogma or public revelation, it has allowed the belief to flourish as an expression of Catholic hope and Marian trust, provided it leads the faithful to deeper virtue. More important than the details of timing or conditions was the deeper truth it pointed to, that Mary walks with us into eternity. Her intercession does not end at death's threshold. She accompanies us through judgment and purification, as a mother who never abandons her child. In times of fear or uncertainty about death, this belief offered not a shortcut, but a consolation, a sign that love continues. Simon Stock, though he never spoke of the Sabatine tradition himself, often emphasized the importance of living now in union with Mary, not just hoping for rescue later. He taught that the most secure path to heaven was daily surrender to God through her praying as she prayed, loving as she loved, trusting as she trusted. In this way, Mary becomes not just an intercessor, but a companion who shapes our heart for eternity. The Church, in its wisdom, invites the faithful to approach these devotions not with superstition, but with serenity. True hope in Mary's assistance must be joined to sincere Christian living. The scapula, if worn, should be a sign of ongoing conversion, a daily yes to God through Mary. The promise of Saturday liberation only has meaning if our lives are already oriented toward grace. For many, the hope in Mary's maternal care after death becomes most real in moments of dying. Countless faithful have found peace in their final hours by invoking her name, holding a rosary, or simply remembering that she is near. Whether through sacraments or silent prayer, they pass into eternity as children who know they are not alone. In the end, the heart of the Sabatine privilege is not about dates or deliverance, it is about relationship. It is about living now in such a way that, when death comes, we do not meet a stranger, but a mother, one who walks with us, prays for us, purifies us, and leads us home not only on Saturdays, but every day, into the dawn of eternal life. Chapter 11. A Holy Death, a Living Legacy. As the years passed, Simon Stock's body grew frail, but his spirit remained unwavering. He continued to guide the Carmelite Order with quiet strength, visiting communities when he could, encouraging the brothers in their life of prayer and fidelity. His words were few, but always rooted in scripture, silence, and trust in Mary. Even in weakness, he remained a shepherd, leading not with authority, but with the witness of a life consumed by love. In his final months, Simon withdrew more frequently into solitude. He spent longer hours before the Blessed Sacrament, his gaze resting on the tabernacle and his fingers gently clasping the scapular he had worn for decades. Those close to him said his presence grew even more peaceful, his voice softer, his smile more radiant. It was as if he already belonged more to heaven than to earth. According to Carmelite tradition, Simon died on the 16th of May 1265 in the city of Bordeaux, France, while on a pastoral visit. The friars who were with him testified that his final moments were marked by extraordinary serenity. He asked for the community to sing Flos Carmeli, the hymn he had composed years earlier. As their voices rose in prayer, Simon quietly bowed his head and passed into eternity. The news of his death spread quickly among the Carmelite communities and among the lay faithful who had known his gentle leadership. His tomb in Bordeaux soon became a place of pilgrimage. Many reported favors granted through his intercession, physical healings, spiritual consolations, and even vocations to the religious life. Though the Church had not yet formalized the modern process of canonization, Simon's cult grew rapidly and steadily. Over the centuries, the Carmelite Order never ceased to honor him as a saint. His name was included in the Roman martyrology, and his feast was officially celebrated within the Carmelite liturgical calendar on May 16th, the day of his passing. Though he was not canonized through a papal declaration, his veneration was recognized as immemorial, having emerged naturally from the faith of the people and the tradition of the order. Simon Stock's legacy is not defined by public miracles or grand achievements. It is found in the depth of his interior life, in his unwavering trust in Mary, and in his ability to lead with humility. He lived hidden in a tree, walked quietly through cities, and died with a prayer on his lips, and yet his life became a foundation stone for generations of Carmelites to come. To this day, his influence continues. Every scapular worn, every Flos Carmeli sung, every soul consecrated to Mary through Carmel carries his silent imprint. He reminds the Church that holiness does not depend on fame, but on fidelity. And through his life and death, Simon Stock left behind more than a memory. He left a path, one that leads, step by quiet step, toward heaven. Chapter 12. Prayer to Saint Simon Stock. In an age of constant noise and endless striving, the life of Saint Simon Stock offers us a different rhythm, a path of stillness, fidelity, and surrender. He shows us that the holiest lives are often the least noticed, and that transformation does not require fame, but trust. Simon teaches us that to cling to Mary is not weakness, but wisdom, and to pray in silence is not escape, but strength. Through him, we learn that even the smallest gesture offered with love can change the world. His life is a reminder, heaven is drawn to the humble. Prayer to Saint Simon Stock. O holy Saint Simon, hidden shepherd of Carmel, you who lived in the hollow of an oak, so that your soul might be filled with God alone, we come before you now, not to admire from afar, but to follow where you have walked. Teach us the value of silence in a world that rushes past stillness. Teach us the joy of hiddenness in a time that craves attention. Teach us the power of surrender in a culture that exalts control. You loved Mary not with mere words, but with a life molded by her presence. You wore her name upon your heart, her promise upon your shoulders. You believed in her even when others doubted, and she answered you with grace from heaven. O beloved Simon, pray for us, that we may wear the garment of humility and walk each day clothed in faith. Intercede for us when we grow weary, when our prayer dries up, when discouragement whispers in the dark. Lead us back to that still place where God speaks quietly and Mary waits patiently. You who led not by command but by example, help us lead others by love, by compassion, by a peace that does not need to shout. You who held the scapular not as an ornament but as a symbol of trust, pray that we may live what we wear, lives consecrated, simple, watchful. In moments of doubt, remind us, Mary does not forget her children. In moments of fear, remind us, the cross is not the end of the story. In moments of death, remind us, those who walk with her will not walk alone. And so we ask you, Saint Simon Stock, to stand with us in prayer and walk beside us in our daily struggles. Teach us a quiet and persevering faith, guide our hands toward humble and hidden service, and lead our souls to rest in the gentle promise of the Mother who never abandons her children. Amen.